Hey everyone, it's Kristen, and I hope that you have heard now. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen my post for the Create This Oracle Deck Challenge edition, the 2022 edition. And this is a challenge that I created back in 2017, and I did it in 2017 and 2018. And it's really a challenge where you make your own Oracle deck based on prompts. And there's 30 prompts. So this year, Kyla Givehand decided to lead this challenge by creating the 30 prompts. And so I'm co-hosting the challenge with her this year. And it occurred to me that I get a question all the time that I haven't addressed that would probably be helpful for me to address now in this video, because hopefully all of you will be making Oracle decks. And that question is about how to laminate, how to print and laminate your own Oracle deck, like at home on your computer and using your own equipment. For me, I've done that a lot. I probably have, I want to say I probably have at least 40 to 50 decks that I've done like that. So I just wanted to give you a kind of really quick understanding of that. I'm not going to go into a lot of details with a lot of things. The main question that people have is just about the order. Do you print, then you cut, and then you laminate, or what's the order? So I just want to explain the order, but since I'm here, I also wanted to give you a few tips, kind of like some do's and don'ts or recommendations, just based on my experience doing this at home. So first of all, I want to tell you the equipment that I use. This does not mean that you have to get this equipment or use this equipment, but as I said, I make a lot of these decks at home. So, and I really don't have anything that I would consider costly equipment. I have a Scotch heat laminator, which was about $20. I use a Fiskars paper trimmer. Let me see if I can get this. I don't know how much of it you can see, but it's just a Fiskars paper trimmer. It's kind of old. It still works pretty well. I also have an HP desk jet. One of the things that people say all the time is, oh, Kristen, I don't have this special printer that you use that you get all this wonderful color, with your decks. And I say I don't have a fabulous printer. I have a regular desk jet. It's roughly $80 to $90. It's an HP desk jet. And I also use a corner rounder. I can show you that here. This one's really great because you can corner around like using this part as opposed to your thumb, because I actually started getting some pain in my thumb because I was overusing. I was doing so much corner rounding. So this one I really prefer. And these, everything that I can put into my Amazon storefront for you, I will put there so that you can see all of these things. And as an Amazon associate, I do earn from qualifying purchases. So I'll put all of the equipment there. Now, I want to just say something really quickly about the color. I'm going to show you a couple of decks that I would say have a lot of color in them. I have gotten this comment from more than one person that, again, they don't have a fancy printer to get this type of color and quality. As I said, I use a desk jet printer. And what I want you all to know is that it is not the printer, it is the paper that you use that helps you to get a better quality and more pop with your color. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. This is Nina Bright White. It is premium cardstock. It's 65 pounds. Paper. You will, let me push this out so you can see down here. I buy it in the 250 sheets. You don't need to buy that many. That just shows you how many decks I create and things that I make. I also use this as the same paper I use to make the poppets that I make, the paper poppets. Let me just show you really quickly. So I use that to make the clothing. So I go through a lot of that. And that is the paper that I would recommend. It really does make the colors pop. It really makes them look, the color look a lot more saturated, and to me it gives a lot more clarity. So that I just wanted to share so that you will have a sense of the, you know, kind of overall equipment that I use. Most of these decks that I make on the computer. So I'm using either Canva or Google Slides or some combination of those two, and then I'm printing it out. This is not going to be a Canva or Google Slides instructional though. I want to kind of start with, once you are kind of getting to that place where you're ready to print. So let me move a few things out of the way. And I'm just showing this one as an example. This is a deck that I am kind of finishing up right now. And it's just words. I do like word decks. They're very easy. I have a new word deck that just came out on my Ko-fi shop, the deck of 120 questions. And so if you've downloaded it, hopefully you've put it on, you know, some nice cardstock. And like I said, I like to laminate mine as well. So here's kind of an example of something similar. When I have just a word deck, I like to use color paper. It just makes it pop. You can see how this pops. And this is an Astro Bright paper. I don't know if I have that cover to show, but again, all of this will be in my Amazon storefront because I really use this Astro Bright color paper a lot. So just for example, what you want to do, I do this in Google Slides, meaning even if I make it in Canva, I pull it over in Google Slides just so that I can put them all onto one page. And when I say Google Slides, if you've used like a PowerPoint, it's kind of set up like that. It's not Word. You know, you can create images and things on the page. So that is really how I get ready to print. I try to put as many of my images, in this case we don't really have images, we just have words, but we have 18 cards, 18, you know, little boxes for cards. I set everything up the same way for images, and I try to get as many on the page at the same time. That's just going to save you paper, you know. Sometimes I see people and they just have like a couple of cards on a page. Just put all the cards that you can on a page. Make sure you know what your margins, your print margins are going to be. And you can also see that I bump everything up together, so I don't have any space between each card. And that's because when I cut, I'm going to cut right on this line. So I don't really need the space. Again, that's just creating more work for you. So again, print as many on a page, no space between if you can. You'll also notice this may look black like this line, but it's actually a gray. So one of the things that I do, it's just a pet peeve of mine. I used to just have the black lines in between here that Google Slides naturally puts in. Now I change the color. So I want the color to be a little bit lighter, or sometimes I color code it to the deck itself. And that way when I cut everything out, you're going to be able to see little lines. Like, I'm not perfect. I can't cut these with the paper trimmer perfectly. But hopefully you'll be able to see. Let me see if you can see the edges. If you notice, you'll see yellow. So I did this, the outline, all the lines for this deck. This is the Blood Moon Oracle. It's in my Ko-fi page in yellow. And so for me, the yellow, even though it shows up on all of these cards, it's not as distracting as black would show up. And so it's in the color scheme of the deck. So to me, it just looks better. So you can see you don't really notice it as much. It's kind of glaring though if this was a much darker color. So that's just what I do. That's my preference, because it just makes everything kind of fade out, like those lines that you're not going to be able to get rid of. And it just makes you better able to see the deck, like focus on the image of the deck. Let's say, so one of the things I want to say before I kind of move forward is when you're, like, before you would get to this phase of printing everything out, I would say if you're going to print and laminate at home, it is better to use line art rather than photos. Okay, so I'll just show you what I mean by line art. Art that looks like this, that looks like images rather than photographs. They will just print better, whether you have a DeskJet or any kind of thing, laser printer. The photographs the graininess in a photograph tends to show up. And again, for me, it just doesn't, you just don't get the clarity as you would if you sent it out to a printer. I use Printer Studio for my deck. So if I really want something that's more photographic, I will just send it out to Printer Studio. But there are some exceptions, and I just want to kind of go over those really quickly. This one is a personal deck I just made. It's kind of based on the Triple Goddess. These are based on photos, but they're actually done in a couple of apps. I ran them through a couple of apps. Portra is one of the apps. And so it converts the photograph to an image, to more of an illustration. So you actually lose a lot of that graininess, although the way that I created this, I kind of wanted some of the graininess in there. But what I'm saying is that if you have an app that converts the photograph, then you'll have something that looks a little bit more like an illustration. And it usually does print a little bit better than a photograph. Now, again, another exception. This is a deck, again, another personal deck that I made. This one I made in Canva. I use a lot of very old images. So the photographs that are in here are actually very much vintage photos. So they're already going to lack a certain, amount of resolution. And this deck would look a lot better if it was done, in a Printer Studio kind of place. You get a lot more clarity with the backgrounds and things like that. You get a lot more clarity in the contrast, with the people. But for me, it was fine because I just wanted to keep this as a personal deck. So you may make that decision. I will say that if you know that you want to print and laminate a photographic deck at home, you may want to kind of make some adjustments in your design. Let me give you an example. And this is a deck that I've already started on for the Create This Oracle Deck Challenge 2022. I'm just pulling out some of the cards here. So this one I knew I wanted to do in black and white and photographs. So I wasn't really sure. I did these as a test just to see how well they would print on my computer, and also with the laminating over them. I wasn't sure if the laminating was just going to make them look a little bit dull, but they came out even better than I expected. But in Canva, when I was making them, I really focused on the contrast of colors, because if you're doing something black and white, sometimes all the colors kind of run together and they just all look like the same shade of gray. So I really worked on changing the grayscale of everything so that you could get some contrast with these different images. So that's something that I would recommend if you want to use if you want to use photographs, in particular black and white photographs. Figure out some way that you can add more contrast there. I wanted to also make you, so that's kind of my comments about photographs versus line art. I also wanted to say something in terms of laminating. When I laminate, my preference is to laminate just one sheet of paper. Okay. If you want to do a collage, like this is a deck that I did where I did hand collage. I was like, let's experiment with that. And so I think I have some videos here on YouTube where I kind of go through my process. I don't recommend highly trying to laminate a deck like this, although I am glad that I laminated it. Laminating is always going to make it more durable, especially if you have collage, things can peel off. But what I will say is that lamination to me works better when you have just one sheet. With this, I had an index card, and then I added a back to it. I added a front to it, and then I added like words. So you've got, you know, about 3 or 4 layers here. It's just harder to laminate something like that, meaning the laminate works, but if you are cutting it right to the edge, sometimes it'll kind of peel up, is what I'm saying. So yes, it will laminate just fine. Make sure you use your laminator setting on something that's thick. But if you're like me and you like to cut right to the edge of things, you may have some trouble with that lamination holding. Since these cards were so big, I just ran them through a couple of times, and I would suggest doing like a high heat for your lamination if you've got a lot of kind of layers. So I don't want to deter you from doing this because I really, really love the way that these cards looked and turned out. But if you need the edges to be right up close the way I do, then just keep that in mind, that that lamination may not hold if you've got several layers. If you don't have several layers, you can do like right up to the edge of everything. Because people have asked me, you know, how does the lamination stay on? This is just one sheet of paper because I print this out. You'll also notice I don't do card backs. There's no reason to waste printing ink on a card back, but you know, it's up to you. Okay, so once you have, like I said, with this, I would put this through my laminator, get it hot, put it through my laminator. I don't have this exact page, but I'll show you a page that is some of the Pop-It clothing that I laminate. And this is again on a piece of Nina bright white paper. You can see how nice the colors came out on that. And this is, you know, the lamination makes it nice and thick and solid. And what I really like about it too is that, you know, when you're making this at home, you can make it in different sizes, you know, to match your hand so you can shuffle it well. So the lamination for me isn't just to protect it, it is also to help you shuffle this deck. You know, I can shuffle these really well. I can't shuffle them this well if they're not laminated. Just with the paper, you know, going back and forth. They just shuffle really, really well. And I'm really big on shuffling. So once you have your design printed and laminated, you want to use your paper cutter to cut it out. I would not suggest trying to use scissors. It's just too much. It has to be too precise. You do want to make sure that you know your paper cutter really well. And then once you've cut all of the pieces out, you're going to want to corner round. Okay, this one has 3 settings: small, this one has small, medium, and large. So just get to know what makes sense. For these, I've used the medium setting. So for me, it just depends on the size of the cards. A large card, I would use the large setting. A smaller card, I would use the smaller setting. But the corner rounding, a lot of times people say, do I really need corner rounding? I say, yes, you do. If you want it to look professional, if you don't want these edges to poke you, then yes, you need a corner rounder. And really, it's just going to make all the difference. It is, you know, I have people like, I'll show my decks on Instagram. They're like, oh, that looks nice. Like, where'd you get this? And I'm like, I made this at home. The reason why it looks so professional is because of the Nina Bright White paper and the laminating and the corner rounding. So I think that's all that I really wanted to cover, just, you know, in terms of this. Feel free to ask me any questions about this process. But just if you've had questions about printing your own deck at home, you can do it. It is easier than you think. There are some tools, some pieces of equipment that I think are really helpful. Again, that heat laminator, corner rounder, paper trimmer that you need, but you don't need a really fancy printer or anything like that. It is also, I think, a good idea to learn how to use Google Slides, Canva, or some other tool so that you can lay everything out and you know, get the designs that you want, and you know, and be able to have the cards that you really want to use and work with. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much.